I wish I had a video of this because I was, and back then, like, you didn't save emails. You didn't say, I don't have any like actual record of this, but I was on a diversity panel for middle schoolers when I was in the 11th grade. They had a lesbian, a kid on financial aid, because it was a very fancy prep school, a religiously different kid, a Jane, a freakishly tall kid.
A Jane. It's not easy to find a Jane in New York
There were actually
City.
a lot at my high school. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. So a Jane, a freakishly tall kid, and then me as the conservative. Oh. And so, the lesbian goes up and everyone's like, oh my God, you're so brave. And everyone's like applauding her.
Yeah.
And then I go up, and back then we called ourselves Republicans, we actually, it was a word you were allowed to use. Now we can't because of rhinos, I guess.
Yeah.
But I went up on stage and said, I believe in limited government and individual autonomy. And everyone was like, oh!
Bring back the lesbian.
Everyone said, bring her back on stage. Get rid of this girl. And from then on, people would always come up to me. Like, I was like the Underground Railroad of conservatives of Horace Mann, where people would come up to me and whisper in the bathroom, like, I'm actually conservative too. And that's when I started to realize that people were aligned and they were just afraid to say it. And God wired my brain this way. It was always easier to just say what I believed than to pretend something else.
All right, Arynne Wexler, a.k.a. Non-Lib Take. I'm holding my glasses in my hands, which means I'm going to ask you very serious questions this entire time, doing this, and then saying, so who is Arynne Wexler? What's going on here? For most people that are watching this, they've probably seen you on this show before. But for somebody that has no idea who you are, other than absolutely amazing hair, what's going on with this Arynne Wexler chick?
Well,
why is she on the Rubin Report?
If they don't know me, they should know I usually don't look this put together. The hair's never, I got to blow out for you, Dave.
Thank you.
So I dress my best for you. Although it's making up for the number.
Not totally sure what a blowout is. It's that's you just go to get your hair.
I got my hair.
They don't cut it. They just blow dry.
They just put air on it and make it look nice.
And you can't do that at home.
No, I don't know how to do this. So usually when I'm on your show during the week, I have half wet hair and you still, for some reason, let me back on.
We still put you on. Well, it's on Skype. It's not as jarring.
It's not as obvious. Yeah. But I run the Instagram account Non-Lib Take, although I'm talking with people about maybe changing the handle because I'm not a marketing expert, but I really have approached politics this last year. I was in tech up until a year ago, wanted to come with a different angle of being a more city conservative, not necessarily the part of the movement that I love, which is Nashville, cowboy boots, country music. That is a part of our culture, but also meeting people in this more urban culture of you could live in a condo and go to Casa Cipriani and be normal and have common sense and still vote for Trump and wear your MAGA hat in New York City. And I use humor a lot. I like to say I'm funny for a woman, even though the bar for that is exceedingly low.
Yeah, it's pretty. We lost Joan Rivers, and then it's been pretty much nothing since then.
May she rest in peace. We love Joan. And I like to say that I'm sort of if Joan Rivers and Ben Shapiro had a baby, that it would be me because
And you grew up near Joan Rivers country, right?
Yes.
In Westchester.
Yes. Yeah. But I love diamonds and I have her sense of humor and I have his politics and eyebrows. And so I'd say in a nutshell, that's who I am.
Those are the Ben Shapiro eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Wow. And you can do the double.
I could do a little.
The double move. Before you got into this crazy world of politics, you were in tech, you were in finance, you have a pretty good pedigree of like real things before you got into the wacky world of politics. Yeah. Let's do that a little bit.
Yeah. So I was a real person before being an influencer. All my friends joke that I moved from New York to Miami and became an influencer because that's like the classic path now.
Yeah.
But this was the harder path. And this was the path that I decided a year ago was important because people forget now that Trump's in office, everything's going so well. It feels like it was predestined, and in many ways it was. But a year ago, it didn't feel that way. A year ago, it felt very tenuous. Biden was still the nominee. And I was sitting in my tech job at a great company with great people. And I thought, am I really going to sit here like typing away, doing not important, like it's fun, it's interesting, but it's not important stuff? Or am I going to try to change the culture and show people that you can be conservative, and also take people who are already conservative and make them more courageous and show them it's okay to say these things? So I'm the person that says the thing that even a conservative is usually afraid to say. And I was very thankful to you that last week you actually covered some of my quotes from New York Magazine.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we want to get into that at all.
Sure.
But I say the thing that
we'll show the cover of the article right now because it was very scary. White people, although just out of frame, Black people.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was all kinds of people who were there from all backgrounds. But so that's how I got into this, is realizing that even though I listen to most of my podcasts that I listen to are white men, but a lot of people actually need someone that looks like them. And I get this comment a lot that I look and talk the way someone who would vote for Kamala, the way a liberal would look, because I am from New York. I did go to all these institutions that they all aspire to be a part of. I went to the Ivy League. I worked at Goldman Sachs on the trading floor. I was working in tech at these, hot startups. So they also can't call me stupid on the left, because I might be retarded, but I'm not stupid. And so they really can't go after me.
I might be gay, but I'm not stupid.
I might be a woman. I don't know, but we'll stop there. But yeah, that's basically how I got into this.
So how did you not? We've discussed some of this stuff privately, and we were friends outside of this. So you said to me right before we started, it's kind of funny because then we sit down and then the camera's on and it alters everything by 5%. And also we're going to talk about some things that I actually do know about you, but have to ask you anyway.
Yeah.
But how did you not get infected by that thing? I mean, can I say your age?
You could say 31.
You're 31,
yes.
Right? You're 31. So your prime age to have been really hit by all of that woke crap, even though it was a little bit before we called it woke and everything.
Yeah.
How'd you not were you ever infected with?
No, I never was. I don't have a dark past like you, Dave. I always say that I was always conservative because I always had a brain, but I grew up in a house, and I noticed on Bill Maher, he asked Matt Gaetz recently, he asked a lot of conservatives, and you've been on his show, and he always asks the conservatives on his show, well, are your parents conservative? And it's because we're this anthropological enigma to the left, where they can't possibly imagine that we just thought this way on our own, right? It had to come as a legacy from our family that infected us. No one ever asks anyone on the left if their parents were liberal, and my parents were conservative.
It's also an implication that somehow something's wrong with it, that it had to have been force-fed to you as opposed to you coming
to the conclusion, yes. But my parents actually never told me what they thought. Actually, they didn't tell me if they believed in God or what their politics were. To this day, I actually don't. I should ask my parents
Maybe you could ask.
if they believe in God. I know at this point we're all very openly conservative.
Maybe they could comment on the video. That would be fine.
Yeah, they're boomers, so I can't ask them to do that. But they just let me come to my own conclusions, and they would also. It was kind of like the Kennedys, where our dinner table was always, great debate, where we would just take the other side to have it be very lively. And if I ever made a comment, I remember being 10 years old and saying something that I read in the newspaper, and my mom said, "Well, back it up." What do you mean by that? Back it up. And they did that because I think they knew that I would logically come to the conclusion that the right was right, and so they let me go through that journey on my own instead of force-feeding me liberal propaganda. And so since I was sentient, I remember just thinking this was common sense.
So you go through some of these institutions as the conservative chick.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that doesn't win you a lot of friends in that world.
No, it was tough, but I realized before cancel culture it was called cancel culture, and what it really morphed into, which was people losing their jobs and their lives being ruined. And I realized back when I was in middle school, actual middle school, where I was dealing with really intense history teachers. I went to one of the top prep schools in the country in New York City called Horace Mann. And most of our professors were PhDs from Harvard, things like that. And I remember having this one professor in particular who was so liberal that I just had to go in and know every last fact about what we were talking about. And I also realized that if I was just open about being conservative, there was no gotcha moment. because I was just already openly conservative. And so it was just kind of, it was always a joke. It was always like, Arynne's the conservative. She's the crazy conservative one. But they also actually respected me for it because I always knew what I was talking about. And actually, this is a real story. And I wish we had social media back then. I also don't. But
no. Best we didn't have it back then. I don't even know what you're going to say, but it's best we didn't.
I wish I had a video of this because I was, and back then, like, you didn't save emails. You didn't say, I don't have any like actual record of this, but I was on a diversity panel for middle schoolers when I was in the 11th grade. They had a lesbian, a kid on financial aid because it was a very fancy prep school, a religiously different kid, a Jane, a freakishly tall kid.
A Jane. It's not easy to find a Jane in here.
There were actually a lot at my high school. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. So a Jane, a freakishly tall kid, and then me as the conservative. And so, the lesbian goes up and everyone's like, oh my God, just so brave, and everyone's like applauding her.
Yeah.
And then I go up, and back then we called ourselves Republicans, we actually, it was a word you were allowed to use. Now we can't because of rhinos, I guess.
Yeah.
But I went up on stage and said, I believe in limited government and individual autonomy. And everyone was like, oh!
Bring back the lesbian.
Everyone said, bring her back on stage. Get rid of this girl. And from then on, people would always come up to me. Like, I was like the Underground Railroad of conservatives of Horace Mann, where people would come up to me and whisper in the bathroom, like, I'm actually conservative too. And that's when I started to realize that people were aligned and they were just afraid to say it. And God wired my brain this way. It was always easier to just say what I believed than to pretend something else.
When did you realize that the sort of New York City conservative needed to meet the kind of Nashville conservative? Because I do think that's an interesting part of this. For a lot of the, let's say, disaffected libs, the RFK, Tulsi types, even the way I was years ago, there's this thing like, oh, if you start hanging out with the conservatives, next thing you know, you're like at the rodeo. Not that there's anything wrong with the rodeo, but it's like a leap too far for some of these people, at least overnight.
Yeah.
And I think you sort of grasped like, oh, you can still be in these different divergent places and kind of all come together in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I float between all these different worlds. So I have friends who, like I've gone hunting in Alabama and we didn't get anything, but that's a whole other story. We'll go again. But, and I've been to the rodeo now that I'm in this space with friends like that.
You've been to the Florida rodeo.
I've been to the Florida rodeo. So I want to go to like the Texas rodeo. I want to go to like a real, like I love going out west, but I've always liked bluegrass, not country. Like, sorry, some people might dislike me over that. But I think it's okay. I want to show people that you can have these ideas and you don't have to meet us in what we're calling maybe like our culture on the right, because I think that makes a lot of people think who would otherwise share, the majority of their views would overlap with the conservative movement, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it. They think, well, I want to live in a city and I don't want to live, am I allowed to curse on this show?
You can curse on the show. Have you ever seen the Rubin Report before?
Yes, I've been
very popular program.
But you don't have to want to turn your own fucking butter at home.
Right.
To vote in this way, right? And that's really important. And by the way, I want to have my own home churned butter, but I'm from
it sounds great.
I'm from New York, so I'll have the nanny do it.
Okay,
I won't actually do it.
I saw Joan just appear for a moment. That was a little Joan Rivers right there.
Yeah.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.